Here tonight to talk to you about those plains, Iowa City. Please join me in giving a big Hawkeye welcome to Senator Elizabeth Warren.
Hello, Iowa City! And thank you for the introduction, Zach. Let's give Zach another hand. I love you too. I am so glad to be here with all of you. You know, before we get started, I do want to say tomorrow is the climate strike. This is a moment when young people have stepped up, when their elected officials have failed to do their business for decade after decade after decade. And I commend everyone who participates in that strike tomorrow, everyone who supports it. The climate, yes. The urgency of this moment cannot be overstated. Climate change threatens every living thing on this planet, and we are literally running out of time for change. And yet, I have to say, at this moment, I'm deeply hopeful. And I'm hopeful in part, you may have heard, I do selfie lines. I'm hopeful in part because of the number of people who come through and we shake hands and we do pictures and we do hugs, but who talk about how committed they are to make this government work, not just for the oil industry, not just for the big polluters, not just for the giant corporations, to make it work for their generation and for future generations. And that's what this strike is about tomorrow. So thank you. So I'm so glad to be on a college campus. I love college campuses. It is good to be here at the University of Iowa, and thank you to the Iowa Democrats for inviting me. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. So for me, this is kind of a family thing when I come out and do this. And today I brought family. I brought my son, Alex. Where are you, Al? Where are you, bud? Oh, there he is, guy in the blue shirt. Wave. Alex has been my tech support since second grade. It's true. It's a true story. He now runs his own consulting computer thing. You can see how well I know. That's why I have tech support. But he's also taken on a second job, and it's called Support Your Mother When She Runs for President of the United States. Thank you. So I thought what we'd do tonight, here we are in this gorgeous spot, I thought what we'd do tonight, I'd tell you a little bit about myself, tell you a little bit about why I'm in this race. We'll do some questions, and then if anybody wants to, I'll stay as long as you want, and we'll do selfies. So I was born and raised in Oklahoma. It's okay. It's okay. There aren't that many of us. I get it. But born and raised in Oklahoma. I'm the baby. I have 3 much older brothers. I'm what used to be referred to as a late-in-life baby. My mother always just called me the surprise. My 3 older brothers all went off and joined the military. My oldest brother was career military. He was in combat in Vietnam off and on for about 5.5 years. We were very lucky to get him back home. My second brother, John, He was stationed overseas for a little over a year. My third brother, David, trained as a combat medic. Now, the consequence of that is it has given rise to a rule in our family, and that is don't choke in front of David. He is convinced that he could perform an emergency tracheotomy if needed. Always has his knife with him, ready to go. It makes for some exciting moments at Thanksgiving. Someone goes, and we're all like, no, David, we're good. We're good here. We're good. I love my three brothers. In fact, just today, while we were changing planes in Chicago, I talked to 2 out of 3. And they're all back in Oklahoma now. They all live fairly close to each other. They're all retired. When we were growing up, our daddy had a lot of different jobs. He sold fencing. He sold carpets. He sold housewares. He sold paint. And then when I was in middle school, the boys, and they are to this day referred to as the boys, the 3 of them, the boys were all gone by then. And it was just my mama and my daddy and me. And my daddy had a massive heart attack. And for a while, we thought we were going to lose him. Folks from church brought a covered dish. Everybody spoke in low tones. Now, Daddy pulled through, but he couldn't go back to work for a long, long time. I still remember the day that we lost our family station wagon. I remember my mother at night would tuck me in, and she'd give me a kiss, and she'd step outside the door and close it, and I knew what was coming next. She'd start to cry. She never wanted to cry in front of me, but that was as long as she could hold it. This is when I learned words like mortgage and foreclosure. And one day I walk into my folks' bedroom, and laid out on the bed is the dress. Now, some of you here will know the dress. It's the one that only comes out for weddings, funerals, and graduations. And there's the dress, and then there's my mom. And she's in her slip and her stocking feet, and she's pacing and saying, "We will not lose this house. We will not lose this house. We will not lose this house." She was 50 years old. She had never worked outside the home, and she was terrified. And finally, she looks up and sees me standing there in the doorway. I'm just a kid. And she looks at me, and she looks at that dress, and she looks at me, never says a word, wipes her face, pulls that dress on, puts on her high heels, and walked to the Sears and got a full-time minimum wage job answering phones. That minimum wage job saved our house, and it saved our family. Now, I always thought of this as the story, the lesson my mother taught me. And that is, no matter how scared you are, no matter how hard it looks, when it comes down to it, you reach down deep, you find what you have to find, you pull it up, and you take care of the people you love. Yes. And years later, I came to understand that wasn't just the lesson my mama taught me. That's what millions of people across this country do every day. No matter how hard it looks, no matter how scared they are, when it comes down to it, they reach down deep, they find what they have to find, they pull it up, and they take care of the people they love. That's what we do in America. It was only years after that that I came to understand that same story about my mother is also a story about government. Because understand this, when I was a girl, a full-time minimum wage job in America would support a family of 3. It would cover a mortgage, the utilities, and put groceries on the table. Today, a full-time minimum wage job in America will not keep a mama and a baby out of poverty. That is wrong, and that is why I am in this fight. And why this difference? It is a difference of who this government works for. When I was a kid, the question asked in Washington about the minimum wage was, what does it take a family of 3 to survive? What does it take a family of 3 to get a toehold in America's middle class, a chance to have something solid that they can build from? Today, the question asked in Washington is, where do we set the minimum wage to maximize the profits of giant multinational corporations? Well, I don't want a government that works for giant multinational corporations. I want one that works for our families. So that's it for me. You know, I told you, my 3 brothers, they all went off to the military. That was their path to America's middle class. Me, I had a different dream. I have known what I wanted to be since 2nd grade. Some of you may laugh. You didn't know until what, 4th grade? Just held back, right? But I have known since 2nd grade, and I've never wavered from this. I wanted to be a public school teacher. Can we hear it for America's public school teachers? Yes. Oh, and I committed to this dream. I love this dream. I used to line my dollies up and teach school. I had a reputation for being tough but fair. I loved it. But by the time I graduated from high school, we didn't have the money for a college application, much less to send me off to 4 years at university. So, like a lot of Americans, I don't have exactly a straight line story. I have a story that has some twists and turns. So here's how my story goes. I got a scholarship to college. Yay! And then at 19, I fell in love, dropped out, got married, and got a minimum wage job. Yay! Look, it's what I chose. I get it. But I thought I'd given up on the dream. I thought the dream was lost and that I would never get that chance. And then I found it. About 45 minutes away from where we were living, I found what was then a commuter college that cost $50 a semester. Think about that. For a price I could pay for on a part-time waitressing job, I finished my 4-year diploma and I became a special needs teacher. I have lived my dream job. Yeah. So have we got any special needs teachers in here? We have some. Whoa, we got right here. Boy, she is ready. I do too. Yes. Yes. Okay, good. So you got to back me up on this. Okay. Wait till you hear what I say. So I'm just going to tell you all, teaching is not a job, it is calling. And the people who do it love it. That's how it's supposed to be. Am I right on this? You can back me up? That's right, because you're not going to, no, that's not the answer. Okay. So I still remember my kids. I had 4 to 6-year-olds. I love those kids. I can still tell you what they look like. I can tell you what their particular issues were. And I probably would still be doing that work, but my story has a couple of more twists in it. And here's the next twist. By the end of the first year, I was visibly pregnant. And the principal did what principals did in those days. Wished me luck and hired someone else for the job. So, okay. I'm at home. I got a baby. I can't get a job. What am I going to do? I know. I'll go to law school. For your friends who end up in law school, never inquire too closely how they got there. So I decided to go to law school. I find by this time we've moved someplace else. We moved to New Jersey at this point. New Jersey? No. Oh, there we go. We've moved to New Jersey. I find a state law school that costs $450 a semester. Baby on hip. I do 3 years in law school. Graduate visibly pregnant. You will discover a pattern to these stories. That was Alex. Thank you, son, for waiting until after graduation to be born. And practice law, took the bar, practiced law for 45 minutes. And then I went back to my first love, teaching. I traded little ones for tall ones in law school. And I don't know if everybody does this, but for me, kid who grew up with no money and it was always tight and always worried, I taught every money course. If it was about money, I learned it and then I taught it. So I taught contract law and commercial law. I taught secured transactions. I taught corporate finance. I taught partnership law. I taught bankruptcy law, debtor-creditor, law and economics. I taught it all. But there was always one central question that I worked on. And that one central question was what's happening to working families in America? Why is it that people who work every bit as hard as my mother worked 2 generations ago find the path so much rockier and steeper today, and for people of color, even rockier and even steeper? And the answer to that question is the same as it was on minimum wage. It's who government works for. So think of it this way. We have a government in America that works just great. It works fabulously for giant drug companies, just not for people trying to get a prescription filled. Yeah, it works terrifically for those who want to invest in private prisons and private immigration detention centers, just not for the people whose lives are destroyed by those places. It works terrifically for giant oil companies that want to drill everywhere, just not for the rest of us who see climate change bearing down upon us. Think of it this way. Whatever issue brought you here tonight, whether it's gun violence, healthcare, education, whatever brought you here, if there's a decision to be made in Washington, I guarantee it's been influenced by money. It's been shaped by money. It's been eased in a direction by money. In fact, I want to tell you a quick story. So back in the early 90s, we're starting to figure it out about climate change. Don't have it all, but the basic science has come through. Whoa, this is not looking good, right? The earth is heating up, man-made, more carbon in the air. We're getting the basics of it. And here's the amazing thing. You go back and look, Democrats and Republicans are working together on this issue in Washington. They're both in. Why? Because nobody wants to be responsible for the kind of catastrophe that it looks like is coming, right? So they're kind of all in. Everybody's working on it. They're talking about things like, do we need more authority for the EPA? Do we need some other rules? What kind of tools do we need here? And then along come the Koch brothers. Ooh, you've heard of the Koch brothers. along come the big fossil fuel companies. You've heard of them too. Along come the big polluters. And in effect, they get together and say, you know, if Washington gets serious about this climate business, that's going to bite into our bottom line. Our profits are not going to stay where they are. So they have an investment decision to make. They could decide, that's it. We're not. Woohoo! Oh, there we go. Shouldn't have done that. Okay. So they've got an investment decision to make. And they could decide, we're going to get out of fossil fuels. We're going to go totally to renewables. That's where they don't do that. They could decide, we're going to invest heavily in the cleanup, how you get carbon out of the air, how you clean the stuff out of the water. They don't do that. They invest in politicians. Think about this. They come to Washington and they make the big campaign contributions. And they invest in the think tanks, in the PR, in the lobbyists. In fact, one of the first big investments they make is the bought and paid for experts. The ones who come in on their nickel and declare that, well, climate change isn't real, it's all a hoax, dinosaurs loved it, whatever it is they want to say. And think about this. Why? Not because those guys don't understand what's going on. The reason is because when you've got a bought and paid for expert saying that, it builds an umbrella over the politicians. So the politicians can hide under it. They can keep taking oil company money, big polluter money, and say, gee, climate, I just don't know. You want to understand the climate crisis we face today? It's 25 years of corruption in Washington that has brought us here. And that is how we have to understand this. We have to understand that when government works for the wealthy and the well-connected, when government works for those who have money, when government works for those who can hire armies of lobbyists and lawyers and is not working well for everyone else, that is corruption, pure and simple, and we need to call it out for what it is. Corruption that affects one decision after another in Washington. So here's what comes to us. What are we going to do about this? We're not at a moment where you can say, I know I've got 2 statutes over here and 1 regulatory change over there, and we'll change the head of a department over there. No, we need big structural change in this country. We need a government that doesn't just work for the rich and the powerful. We need a government that works for the people. And how do we get there? I got a plan. So here's where it starts. We need to tackle corruption head on. We just need to run right down the middle at it. And here's the good news. I have the biggest anti-corruption plan since Watergate. Here's the bad news. We need the biggest anti-corruption plan since Watergate. So it is a big plan because money is felt in so many different ways. And it's not going to be enough just to hit 1 or 2 of them. You really got to do a lot of stuff here. So let me just give you a sample from this bill. You ready? Part 1, end lobbying as we know it. Yep. Block the revolving door between Wall Street and Washington. Here's one you may never have thought of. Make the United States Supreme Court follow basic rules of ethics. Yep. Okay, I could do these all night long. But I'm going to do just one more. You really want to root out some corruption? Make everyone who runs for federal office, everyone, put their tax returns online. Okay, so that's part 1. Attack the corruption head on. We got to do this. We can't play defense forever. We got to go on offense, attack it head on. Part 2, We got to make some structural change in this economy. Structural pieces. So let me talk about what that means. Here's our problem. Right now, we have giant corporations in industry after industry that are just, they're huge. And they've got enormous power. They have gobbled up the little businesses. They have gobbled up the medium-sized businesses. Man, they've gobbled up what used to be big businesses, right? And they've got all this power. The power to run over their own employees, the power to run over their customers, the power to run over the communities where they are. Shoot, the power to make our federal government bend to their will. So what are we going to do about that? Well, part one, how about we get a president who has got the courage to enforce our antitrust laws? Time to break up big ag, right? And big tech, and big finance, yeah. But that's enforcing laws we've got, and it's important. It's really important. I want to talk a little more about structure. Think of it this way. We have got so much power now in the hands of corporations. What we got to do is we got to get some balancing power. And what that means is we need more power in the hands of workers, make it easier to join a union, and give unions more power and they negotiate. Unions built America's middle class. Unions will rebuild America's middle class. So there's a structural change. How about another structural change? It's time for a wealth tax. Okay, so let's talk about how this one works. The idea is it's about your assets, what you got. So your first 50 million free and clear. I see some of you saying, you know, okay, I can deal with this woman. First 50 million free and clear, but your 50 millionth and first dollar, you got to pitch in 2 cents. And no, just 2. Let's not overdo it. Let's just start with 2. 2 cents and 2 cents on every dollar after that. And just so you all, let's follow this for a minute. It's a wealth tax. Anybody in here own a home or grew up in a house where they had somebody owned a home? Yeah, you've been paying a wealth tax. It's just called a property tax. And you pay a lot. And all I'm saying is, for the really, really wealthy, that's the top 1/10 of 1% who have more than $50 million, how about it's not just your real estate, it's also your stock portfolio, your Rembrandt, your diamonds, and your yacht. That's it. Yeah. And understand this. I'm not proposing this because I'm cranky. No, I'm not. I realize there's some billionaires who might think that, but it's not. I mean, billionaires, say publicly, they don't say it directly to my face, but they never talk to me, but, which is okay. What they say is, they say, well, I worked hard. I stayed up late. And I say, yeah, like everybody else, right? But they say, no, I had this great idea. I got out there, or they inherited well. But either way, my pitch is this. You built a great fortune in America. Good for you. Good for you. You built a great fortune, but I guarantee you this. You did it at least in part with the help of workers. All of us help pay to educate. You did it, at least in part. Getting your goods to market on roads and bridges, all of us help pay to build. Yep. You did it, at least in part. Protected by police and firefighters, all of us help pay the salaries for. And we're glad to do it. We are genuinely happy to do it. We want to make these investments in opportunity for people. But all we're saying is if you make it big, I mean really big. I mean really, really big. I mean 1/10 of 1% big. Pitch in 2 cents so everybody else gets a chance to make it in this country. 2 cents. Come on. 2 cents. Oh, and what could we do for 2 cents? 2 cents on those great fortunes, top 1/10 of 1%. Here's what we can do. We could do universal child care for every baby in this country age 0 to 5. Yeah. Universal pre-K for every 3-year-old and 4-year-old in America. And we can raise the wages of every child care worker and preschool teacher in this country. 2 cents. 2 cents. We can do all of that, plus we can make tuition-free every public technical school, 2-year college, and 4-year college for anybody who wants to get an education. Plus, we can truly level the playing field. We can expand Pell Grants. We can invest $50 billion into historically black colleges and universities. Invest 2 cents. 2 cents. We can do all of that, plus we can cancel student loan debt for about 95% of the 2 cents. By the way, 2 cents, we can do all of that and we'll still have a couple of $100 billion left over. Think about what that means in America. We could make a value judgment. Does it stay with the top 1/10 of 1%? Or do we invest in every one of our young people in this country? That's our choice. Okay, they're ready. Okay. Good. No, this is good. This is good. All right, so that's part 2. Part 1, attack the corruption head on. Part 2, a couple of structural changes in this economy. Part 3, we got to protect our democracy. I'll tell you where I start. I want to see a constitutional amendment that protects the right of every American citizen to vote and to get that vote counted. I want a federal law to outlaw political gerrymandering. Enough of this. A federal law to roll back every racist voter suppression law that has been passed. Okay, I could do these all night, but I'm going to do just one more. And that is overturn Citizens United. Democracy is not for sale. So there it is. I just want 3 things. Attack the corruption head on, make a couple of structural changes in our economy, and protect our democracy so that our government truly reflects the will of the people. So a lot of people hear this and they think, you know, you got 3 things in 3 different places. To me, they are not. These are 3 things that are deeply intertwined. Because for me, they're all about what this country should stand for. And it should be about opportunity. Opportunity for every one of our children. Opportunity for every kid in America to get a first-rate education. Yeah. Opportunity to get a good job, to be able to start your own business, to be able to move back to the farm. Opportunity. Remember, I'm a special needs teacher. Opportunity may be a chance to live independently. Opportunity to marry the person you love and build the family you want to build. That's our best America. And here's how I see this. I never in a million years thought I would run for public office. Like I said, all I ever wanted to be is a school teacher. But I run for office because I'm grateful. I run for office because I'm determined. My daddy ended up as a janitor, but his baby daughter got the opportunity to be a public school teacher, the opportunity to be a college professor, the opportunity to be a United States Senator, the opportunity to run for President of the United States. Dream big, fight hard, let's win. You coming back up here to make this happen, Zach? All right, take it over.
So, can everybody hear me okay? Okay. So when you came in, some of you probably, you got a ticket. We're going to draw 3 tickets, and then we're going to answer some questions. So I'm going to read off some numbers. If you hear your number, stand up, yell, persist, and then move either to stage right over here or stage left over here. There are microphones, and we'll right there,
there
and
we go.
right
there.
over there. Okay, sorry. Question number 1, not rigged. Here we go.
Zach is backing this up. Okay.
170020. That's 170020.
020. Persist!
Hey, okay, great.
Woohoo! We have a winner.
Next one. 170134. 170134. Right here.
Whoa! All right.
Last question. And there are going to be a lot of selfies.
Okay.
170016.
016. Anybody?
Going once.
We could throw in a stuffed animal here.
All right. Going twice.
016.
All right, we're going to move on to the last number here. 170138. 138.
138.
Right here.
All
All right.
right.
Okay. Fantastic.
Woohoo!
All right.
All right.
So we're going to start back where we got the first question. Let's go right over here.
Okay. Thank you, Zach.
My
All
pleasure.
right.
I'll hold on to it.
Hi.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi. What's your name?
My name's Jamie Jones. I work at.
Jamie.
Hello. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. This is fun.
It is fun.
It is.
I work at Mount Mercy University in Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
Yay! Go get them.
Yes.
What do you do there?
I'm the marketing director.
So
Yes.
you're standing up and you want to spell that out for everybody and say what the website is?
Yeah, and mtmercy.edu.
Okay, there we go. Okay, tonight was worth it, right, girl? Okay,
It was.
we got this.
Absolutely.
Okay, Jamie.
So my question for you is, what's your favorite book you've read and why?
Sense and Sensibility. Because it's about an observant woman who cuts through all of, I know Jane would never call it this, but the BS, right? No. And we got kids here. Has a lot of layers to it. And I like that. I like that. So I think that's probably my favorite book. Although I have to say, one that has had a big influence on me pretty recently is a biography of Frances Perkins. I drive by when I'm in Washington. Can I do 2 books? Is that okay? The Frances Perkins building every day. It's the Department of Labor. And it's named for Frances Perkins, the first woman in the cabinet. And I'll just do the very, very short story about this. A woman who, at 30 years old, stood on the ground when the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory happened. And she watched as women who were trapped in that fire up on the top 3 floors at a time when the fire department didn't have a ladder to go high enough to where they were, where the fire exits had been locked because the factory owners were afraid that those women would steal scraps of cloth. Women, I say some were as young as 14, they were paid $5 a week to work 6 days a week to try to get their shot at the American dream. She stood there and watched as the fire began to consume the building. And first woman jumped and died on impact. And then 2 more jumped, and then more and more until the bodies piled up on the ground. 146 people died in 18 minutes. And none of this was a surprise. None of it was a surprise. Women had been marching. Labor unions had been marching. Activists had been marching, and they'd called it out, and they'd gotten coverage in the press. And what happened? The factory owners, they knew it. This was no surprise. This was no surprise that something like this was coming. So what had the factory owners done? Instead of spending their money to make it just a little safer, maybe to pay a little more, no, they spent their money in Albany, New York. They spent their money at the state capitol, giving huge contributions to the politicians and greasing the wheels so that nothing happened. So Frances stood on the ground and watched this, and she said, this time it's going to be different. So the following week, 500,000 people showed up in the streets to march in New York. Think about this, it's 1911, and Frances is on lead. And she said, what I'm going to do is you're going to push from the outside, and I'm going to push from the inside. She goes to Albany. She gets herself a commission established. Keep in mind, women cannot yet vote. She's 30 years old, but she has a plan. She gets in there and she fights. Franklin Roosevelt becomes governor. She becomes Secretary of Labor for the state. Franklin Roosevelt, then during the Great Depression, becomes President of the United States. He brings her to Washington. She becomes Secretary of Labor, and she follows exactly the same plan. She says to millions of Americans, get in this fight. You push from the outside. I'll work it from the inside. And here's the thing. What can one determined woman with millions of people to back her up do? I'll tell you what Frances did. Social Security, unemployment, the minimum wage, the right to join a union, the end of child labor, and the weekend itself all came from Frances and the people who fought alongside her. In fact, I love that biography so much, I just talked about it. So I find it inspiring because it's a story. This is how I see this. It's a story about power. It was the power of the giant corporations and the politicians who just kept enriching themselves, and how working people just kept getting the short end of the stick. But it's also about the power of what we do when we get together, we fight side by side, and we got someone who's willing to lead us in that fight. That's why I'm here today. Great question. Thank you. All right. Good question, Jamie. Who else have we got? We got somebody over here? Is that number 2? No. Question number 2?
We're over here.
Over there. Hi.
Hi.
What's your name?
Sonia.
Sonia. Good to see you, Sonia.
Despite my accent, I have lived here. I'm an immigrant, by the way.
Good for you, Sonia.
Long time.
Long time.
Yeah. I retired at this point. I'm a grandmother of 5.
Woohoo!
I belonged, by the way, to something called 100 Grannies, which is very concerned with climate change. But so I'm totally on board with all that.
Okay.
I hope that you get to put in many of your plans.
Yes.
I think they're mostly very wonderful. My only concern is getting the vote for the free college, which of course would be wonderful, don't get me wrong, but is that really something that's going to go over? I mean, I'm concerned also about, automation. How do we retrain people so that people who lose jobs and can't get jobs that like they used to have, who is going to pay for those sort of people to get retrained? And I think we have a lot of people who are disaffected, and the disaffected people might be voting for, I don't know who, and did vote for someone we didn't like. So we need to get the disaffected people on board.
Okay.
And
so let's start with who's going to pay for this.
Yeah, I hope you make it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. So let's start with who's going to pay for it. The answer is the top 1/10 of 1% that can afford it. That's what the 2-cent wealth tax is all about. And look, before you say boo-hoo for the top 1/10 of 1%, do keep in mind, stop. I know. But here's the thing. Just so everybody kind of gets this in perspective, the 99% in America last year, all in, paid in taxes, all their taxes, about 7.2% of their total wealth. The top 1% paid 3.2%. I am tired of freeloading billionaires. For me, I love budgets. I think budgets are interesting. I know, I'm a total nerd on this. Because you want to understand the values of a country, of a people, look at their budgets. Look where they spend their money. And that's our fundamental choice here. Are we going to continue to say the very tip top? Think about it this way. Those fortunes, it's about 75,000 families that would be affected by this. They have their own money managers. They have their own staffs that work for the fortunes to keep building them out and scraping more and more and more money out of this economy. So you ask me about college. Look, I look at it this way. This is realistic about the future. When I talk about technical school, 2-year college, 4-year college, it's not just limited to people who are 19. It's anybody is entitled to get an education. That's what this is about. And that's where we're headed. The idea that you finish your education at 18 or at 20 or 22, that's not what the 21st century is going to look like. You don't paint your house once and say, I'm done forever. You kind of have to go back every few years. And I think the same thing's going to be true on education. And here's how I look at this. Again, it's who government works for. Think of this at the late 1800s, turn of the century. We're seeing a big change in America at that point, right? We're seeing manufacturing rises up. And what you need is you need a lot more workers who can read well, who can read instructions, who can follow diagrams, who can read safety instructions. You need people who can do more math. So the 8th grade education isn't going to cut it anymore. So what did we do as a country? We did 2 things. We made high school mandatory up to a certain age, and we made it free. Think about it. We invested. And I'm going to make one quick pitch, even though you didn't. It's both ends. We cannot think of education in America as K to 12. We now know those babies, they're learning. They're learning from zero. So it's when I talk about good child care, what I'm really talking about is good early learning experiences for all of our babies. Invest then in K-12 and then invest in post-high school education. That is how we build an America that will lead the 21st century. That's how we're going to do it. One more? One more. Zach's going to let me do one more. Okay.
Here?
Who we got?
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Professor Warren.
Oh, Elizabeth, please. What's your name?
My name is Lina Murillo. And
Hi, Lina.
Hi, and I'm a professor here at the University of Iowa.
Woohoo! What do you teach?
So
What do you teach?
I'm a historian. But,
An historian. I'm married to one of those.
well,
okay. He's
you're
fabulous.
you're speaking
Yeah.
to me when you're talking about the
Okay.
turn of the 20th
Yeah,
century.
I know. He does all the old stuff. Yeah.
And I teach in gender and women's studies, so I'm a historian who teaches. So the work that I do, the research that I do is on the history of reproduction. And increasingly, I'm turning to look at the history and intersections of reproduction and white nationalism and white supremacy. And my question to you is, what is your plan to deal with the racial issues that we have in the United States at this moment? The rise of sort of fascistic ideas and that were at one time fringe are now mainstream, and the rise of white supremacist violence against communities of color and historically marginalized communities.
Thank you. White nationalism is a domestic terrorist threat. And we need to call it out. We need a Justice Department that investigates and that prosecutes. It is critical to our survival going forward. So that's where we start. But I want to say more than that. Two things. The first is, we have a race problem in this country. It's an economic problem. It's a social problem. It's a criminal justice problem. It's an environmental justice problem. It's a healthcare problem. So everything I work on, or try to, I think about the race dimension. It's not enough to pretend that as long as we write neutral laws, that somehow the racial injustices and inequities and bigotry that are still making themselves felt today will disappear, just because our words don't use the words that Jim Crow used. I'll try to do this in very short version. That is, I got a housing plan. We got a problem in America on housing, and it's a problem across America. Basically, it's this. Over the past few decades, private developers have just kind of backed out of the market for middle class, working class, poor, working poor housing. They don't build the 2-bedroom, 1-bath house that I grew up in with the converted garage for my 3 brothers to sleep in. They don't build that house anymore. They all have moved to McMansions, and I'm not mad at them. That's where their profits are. At the same time, the government has backed out. So what we've got is basically a deteriorating housing supply, a shrinking housing supply, at the same time that population continues to grow. So that means across America, whether you're talking about in cities or small towns, in rural America, in coastal America, in middle America, we see people paying more and more for less and less in housing. So I got a plan for that. 3.2 million new housing units across America. And it's all paid for. Once again, folks at the top, they can afford it. But here's a piece I just want to single out. Housing is the #1 way that middle-class families build wealth, that working families build wealth. It is the #1 way, because you buy an asset that appreciates over time if you're lucky. It's the #1 retirement plan in America. Pay off your housing and live on your Social Security. It is the #1 way to get intergenerational growth. So you're lucky enough that grandma and grandpa can stay in their home until the end, then the next generation has been lifted up by the value of that home. And the next generation and the next generation. So it should surprise no one here that for decades in America, our federal government subsidized the purchase of housing for white people and discriminated against black people. It was called redlining. And they just said, communities of color, sorry, you can't get access to mortgages. And it produced a black-white wealth gap in this country. Now, that was the law until 1965. And the impact of that law is still felt today in this country. So part of my housing plan says we've got all of this to build housing for everyone, but we're going to address head-on a special problem, and that is what happened to communities of color. So I have a special provision for formerly redlined areas, people who live in those areas, to give some assistance so they can get into housing. That's how we have to approach this. We can do this. And if we were going to be here all night, I'd talk about it through all the other plans, but that's how we have to think about this problem. We have to confront it honestly and then talk about how we can make real change. You know, when I do this, I know I have been teased for having a lot of plans. Frankly, I think if you want to get something done, you ought to have a plan. But okay, I get it that a lot of people say it's too hard, though. You know, you don't want to have all those plans. That's not how you run for office. You run for office, you paint a few word pictures, you say some nice things, you smile more. But I see this as a moment why plans are important. It's because they're hopeful. Think about it this way. People said to the abolitionists, let's go all the way back. They said to the abolitionists, you're not going to make change in this country. It's too hard. Give up now. They said to the suffragettes, right? Just over 100 years ago. Some of our grandmothers and great-grandmothers said to the suffragettes, too hard. Give up now. Said to the early union organizers, too hard. Give up now.